to the Popcorn Square. Today, I am your main host, Kage, joined by
Neff.
And buttons.
And today our episode is called Eight-Legged Freaks, about the Madam Web movie, Sony's first Spider-Man-esque movie of this year. This is something we have been looking at with interest, with great curiosity. Marvel has not been doing so hot, and Spider-Man movies are interesting because they're Marvel, but Sony still has that. And so with the Spider-Man movies that have been really good, everyone was curious, okay, what's it going to be like watching them do a spin-off, okay? And so today, that's what we're going to talk about. I just saw Madam Web for myself. Is it the worst movie I've ever seen? No. Is it the best? Far from it. Me personally, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. In a recent episode, we talked about the movie Argylle. Online, it's been listed as probably the first big bomb of 2024. So I can compare this to that. Like Argylle, I personally did not like it, but this movie, Madam Web, I liked it in the sense that okay, I can follow this. Okay, I'm invested. The story had flow. I see what you're doing. I see the story that you're presenting. And so it was good in that sense. But I do think it could have been better writing-wise. Cast-wise, had no problem. Special effects, I had no problem. Action, had no problem. But I feel like the story definitely could have been tightened up in some areas. But Neff, share your thoughts.
I 100% agree with Kage there. When I watched the film, I noticed, and I've talked about this on the weekly, guys, the dialogue was the problem. You know, when you have useless banter that leads to no type of serious aspects within the film to lead you to a climax at all, you kind of lose interest. They try to develop a couple characters, things like that. But as I said, I think the dialogue gets lost in the sauce there. And if you don't have any dialogue, even within character development, to make you even feel invested in any of these characters individually, because they are their own spider women in a sense, you know what I mean? You're just not going to be interested in anything that takes place down the line there. I felt like the villain, Ezekiel Sims, not the worst villain in the world, but I never felt that he was really a threat to the girls. There are some scenes where he's aggressive with them, stuff like that, and it's kind of like, psychic future visions that Madam Web, Dakota Johnson's character, is having. And, he kills them, basically. But outside of that, in reality, when he came across these women, I never felt that he was a real threat to them or that they were going to be hurt in any sense, because it just felt like, okay, they're going to figure out a way to get out of this. There's not going to be any real danger to their health. And he gets hit a couple times by a couple cars. I thought that was pretty interesting. He kind of got up from that and kept walking along. But once again, to me, it really reminded me of a comic book-esque movie where things happen in a comic that are not associated with reality in any sense. I thought it was odd that he never had shoes on. I thought that was odd. The guy would be in a full suit, no shoes on, right?
I did
Kinda
catch that
odd,
in a few scenes.
right? He had a couple things under his sleeve, couple tools. I know he had some type of tool, almost like a weapon, where if he got a grip of you, he could poison you and shock your nervous system, causing your body to go into cardiac arrest. But they never really go into that as well. I think that just goes along with his powers, because I believe he was bit by the spider as well, that it bit Madam Web's mother, and that's why she got her psychic abilities. But other than that, like I said, the dialogue is the weakest point of the film to me. I thought the CG work was not terrible. There was some shiesty CG in the beginning of the film with the tree people. And then also when Dakota Johnson's Madam Web was actually underwater in that first scene where she's the paramedic, and then she falls into, looked like the Hudson or something like that. There's a scene like that, and the CG was kind of shaky there, but it was not the worst CG. I think for $80 million, which this movie was made, that's actually impressively low for, I think, the era that we're in with comic book movies. The movie itself made approximately, at this point in time, the box office is sitting at, I want to say, $56 million. $56 million. So I don't know if there's going to be much competition other than Dune in probably the next week and a half. Madam Web, let's be honest, it's not going to make any money. At this point, it's basically lost its steam, and I think word of mouth is taken over, and I think word of mouth is very detrimental at this point for any film in the internet era. I think this is why Argyle lost steam as well. I think there's just bad word of mouth, bad reviews, and based off that, people are going to say, I'll skip out on that one. So I think Madam Web is suffering from that. I saw the marketing budget, $60 million. 75% of that was spent on online marketing. You know, we live in the internet e-commerce world now, so that makes a lot of sense to me. But yeah, there's just been a lot of things surrounding this film. I don't think the acting was bad. The CG wasn't that bad. I'll give them praise on this. For it to be $80 million, it definitely looked like they spent more than $80 million on it. So this goes into other conversations we had. Do you need a $200 million budget movie to make a movie look decent? You don't. We've seen this multiple times. And I think Madam Web, if I have to praise anything, I will praise them for keeping that budget at a minimal level and actually being able to get a product across that actually looked like it was worth more than that. Now, you got to have everything tie in together to actually, you know, knock it out the park, which they seem to drop the ball on it. But, you know, that's what they got on their hands at this point. You could tell towards the end of this movie they were definitely trying to spin it for possibly a trilogy. Because the other characters that are along with Madam Web, she kind of goes on her own adventure and finds them all. Just based off interactions she's had with these people before, she realizes that, you know, they are going to be important players. So she goes on her trek and she finds them all, and she's kind of like the Professor X if I had to I guess compare her to anybody. So she corrals them up, but you can tell that they're definitely trying to expand this thing. But like we said with Argyle, if you can't make money right now, you're not getting a trilogy. I don't think Madam Web is getting a trilogy. I don't think Dakota Johnson wants to come back and do it. She said herself she doesn't even know if she's going to watch the movie. This is your main actress saying this. She's not a fan of it as well. So that's just not a good thing. Possibly if they take Madam Web and maybe throw her in a different scene in the Spider-Man film, that's a possibility. This film takes place from 1973 to 2003. I was under the assumption that this was Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man universe. I don't know what universe this is in. It doesn't actually explain anything. I don't know if it's Tom Holland's. Could be Tom Holland's because there's no reference of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man at all, and I believe he would have been around at that time. And then, of course, if anybody is into the lore and the comic books, Madam Web is always an older character. So that also goes back into what I'm saying with, are they trying to grow this thing out into their own series, of course, you know what I mean? Because Madam Web is older in the comics, and she's older in the actual animated Spider-Man series in the 90s. So Dakota Johnson's 30 in this film. So obviously that's not the right age. But yeah, Madam Web, like I said, I gave it, I believe it was a 5.5 out of 10. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen. It's not the best. But I will say the dialogue is the weakest point. If you can get through that, maybe you like it. There's some decent acting. It's not the worst acting. There's some funny stuff too. But like I said, you want to be interested and invested in these characters so that you actually feel like you have a connection with them and you want to know more about them. If you don't feel interested or connected, you just won't care. I think a lot of people are actually comparing this directly to Spider-Man, which I think is hindering this as well. Mm-hmm. Spider-Man is decent. I don't think the Spider-Man movies are the best, but they are pretty decent films, and Spider-Man does do well at the box office, and everybody likes Spider-Man films. When you have something that's female-led and Sony's pushing it, you know, that's kind of a tough shadow to get from under. You know what I mean? So I felt like this movie was very important to them just trying to get off the ground a female-led Spider-Man universe. And Madam Web is a pretty important character in the Spider-Man universe. But since this movie didn't do well at all, I just don't see where this is going in the future. I know Buttons had some stuff going on. I don't think she's been able to see this. But based off the things me and Kage have said about this film, I wonder what she feels about just the things we've said, the box office, the budget, the marketing, your main actress not really caring for the film, the dialogue. What do you think, Buttons?
So, you know, we in previous episodes talked about the movies that we were looking forward to seeing, and this movie, for me, I know I mentioned that I was very interested based off of the second trailer that I saw. The first trailer did not grab me for this movie. The second one, it kind of, you know, wanted me to, it presented itself in a better light and I wanted to maybe go see this movie, I probably will not go see it in theaters. And that's for two reasons. One, I am seeing a little bit of the negativity come across in reviews and that. And for me, it's so close to March, and those are the movies I'm going to want to see. And I will go ahead and tie that to this box office. Guys, this is going to be, the last week that it's going to make any money because, next weekend, we're going to start getting into, getting ramped up for all the movies coming out in March. And of course, on the 1st, we know Dune Part 2 is coming. And for me, I'm going to be saving my money for that one, guys. I will watch this movie when it goes to streaming. And it's mainly because I was on the fence about it before, now seeing kind of the reviews and everything. And I will say, hey, I don't make millions of dollars. So, if I'm going to go spend $50 to go watch something in theaters, I want to at least be excited about it. So, I mean, this movie, I'm not excited to go see it in theater. So it'll be one for me for streaming for sure. But it is sad to see something that, a lot of people get passionate about. A lot of these studios, they set it up for trilogies. They want, these characters to come to life and be in people's homes and whatever for, several years. They're trying to get longevity out of the actors and actresses. And I know that, that might be why they are picking a younger actress for Madam Web, for the fact that they could get longevity out of her. But it does not bode well if your actress is like, I don't even want to go see this movie because I think they did it wrong. Now, it could also be some actors and actresses just don't like watching themselves. Like they've never seen their work. There's some very famous actors out there that are like, no, I will not go watch any of my work because it's weird for me to see myself up on the big screen. And they're like, I don't want, it to taint how I feel like I'm performing so that, then I second guess myself and maybe not, do the character as well if I have to do like a repeat character or anything like that. To me, I don't think that's the reason why she's doing this. I think, or saying that she doesn't want to watch the movie. I think she's just saying that, based off of what the reviews are that are coming out, she's like, man, it must be trash the way they edited it. Maybe it just, does not come across. And, if you get a bad review from somebody over something that you put a lot of time and effort into, and they're just like, man, that was a complete dumpster fire, you're not going to be excited to then go watch it. You don't want to,
Right.
Something else too that comes to mind when I think about this since I just saw it. I feel like they dropped the ball in a lot of areas. They showed the 3 girls, right? They showed them in uniform having powers, and I was like, okay, all right. And like Neff said, Madam Web is the Professor X, and here are her little small elite group of Spider Women, her little X-Men, if you will. And I'm like, okay, I'm invested. I want to know more about these ladies. I want to know what their powers are. I want to know, and I didn't know if we were going to get that. And we see them fighting, and I'm like, oh, okay. And I don't get that. We don't see them get their powers. We don't see their formation. They just become besties. I think I don't know if cop-out is the right word, because she takes the girls because she sees a vision. Sorry, spoilers. But like she takes the girls and she's like, oh, I gotta protect, and they're freaking out like, who are you? What are you doing? And they just roll with it. And I'm like, as an audience member, I'm like, oh, okay, we're not gonna get any explanation on that. I guess we're just gonna
plot.
Yeah, I guess. So we're moving forward. And then like the main villain really didn't do it for me. I'm like, okay, what is your motivation? Why are you doing this? You really want this spider because something happened to you when you were young. And they don't really I don't really care about his motivations. You're not really doing that. And lastly, the character, Madam Web herself, I did not like her. I did not like her. Not a
What didn't you like about it? Did you not like the portrayal, or you didn't like the actual character?
And that right there is a fantastic question, because in previous podcast episodes, I talked about not knowing much about Madam Web, not knowing about the comic, not seeing her in the shows or whatever, I don't know. I can't tell you. I can't compare the characters. So I don't know how the character really is to make a fair assessment.
So you'd have to go back and do some
Right,
research
right.
to find out if that is true to what her comic book
Right.
character is.
Yeah, like she's a paramedic, and one of the things that rubbed me the wrong way was you're a paramedic, you save lives, and what do you know? She saved a life, and a little girl gives her a crayon card, thanking her, and the appropriate response is, "Oh, thank you," or something like that. She could not wait to get away from the kid, and what do I do with this? And the guy was like, just put it in your pocket and throw it away later. And I'm like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I'm like, when you watch, I know it's not Marvel, but when you watch these comic book superhero movies, you generally like Peter Parker. You like the character, they're charismatic. Tony Stark, you're like, I like this guy, but you want to be able to like the character before they get their powers.
Well,
I think.
I will say this because you mentioned Tony Stark, and yes, Peter Parker, very likable, very friendly guy. Tony Stark had the reputation of being more of a kind of a dick.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, he's
that's
like,
fair.
I'm rich, so
Yeah, I know,
you guys
but
have
like
to do what I
it was
want.
funny, but like the character in this, you weren't making me laugh, and I'm like, okay, so far you're rubbing me the right way, and she's extremely bitter, because her mom died giving birth to her, and so she has this resentment, gets invited
For like
to
how her life turned out.
yeah,
because
she
of
gets
it.
in. She gets a card from a child for saving a life, saving the parent's life, and she could not care less. So get this thing away from me. I don't want to do anything with the child. I don't want to do anything with this card. A guy tries to be nice to her. I don't want anything to do with it. Oh, let's go to a baby shower. Oh, I don't want to do that. And she goes, and she's absolute worst. Not to say that I'm a big baby shower fan.
Well, do you think that they did that for? I mean, granted, I haven't seen the movie, so I couldn't know for sure. But do you think that they did that to give her character like a way to develop throughout the movie? So she starts out where she doesn't really associate with people very well, and especially children, and then she ends up with these 3 girls that now she's being mother essentially to help them develop their powers or their skills or whatever, and navigate this new world as spider women.
And that is an excellent point, Buttons, because I think this goes back to the comment that I made about I don't know the character, and I think that would really help me go into this a little more
Look at it from a different angle.
Yeah, like if I knew a little bit more about the character Madam Web in her origin story, how true are you being to? Because maybe I'd buy that. And when I watched this movie and we made that transition to her not caring about anyone but herself to, now she's a surrogate mother to these 3 superheroes in training, as it were. Because when it wrapped up, I was like, I want to know more. I want to know. Okay, now that her powers are realized, and she's Xavier, essentially. I want to see, okay, what do you do now that you found your powers? I want to know more about these 3 girls. What are their abilities? I want to see a sequel. Do I think we're going to get one? No.
I like you brought that up. You're being honest. I would say, because I think the word you're trying to find is it's empty.
Yeah.
It's like empty. But I think that for me, I like the last probably 30 minutes of the film more than anything, because that's when you see her really come full circle.
Yes.
And she accepts her powers for what they are, and she becomes blind, because Madam Web is blind.
Okay.
So she becomes blind, and then you kind of see her in
No more paramedic work for her.
But she's not just blind. She's in a fancy chair.
Yeah, so it comes full circle.
She is Xavier.
No, absolutely.
Bro,
because
essentially she is like Professor Xavier.
Yes.
Like, but
Yeah.
in her own right, and you see with her connection to Spider-Man that she's kind of guiding him as well. Like I said, in that animated series, Madam Web comes up, and she's like, I said, in a sense, she's almost stronger than like Peter Parker, in a sense. You know, not physically, right?
Right, but her mental.
her powers. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And like I said, she's older, so she knows about more than him. You know what I
'Cause she
mean?
can look
She's like a
into-
guide, right?
She can look
And
into
so-
timelines.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So it sounds like, as far as this movie goes,
They
that we're
wanted a trilogy
tie.
out of this. I'm telling you.
Yeah. So it looks like we're seeing a tie that this movie in particular is going to be her origin story. So obviously she starts off, she's not blind, and then by the end she's closer to her character that was in the comic
Right.
books.
Right.
So as far as setting her up for sequels in this movie, and it could be that is the direction that they go in if they decide to do another movie. Now, that being said, you compare this to a failure like Argyle. They had an $80 million budget. This movie is made 50 something
Right.
million.
It's not as bad. Yeah.
It's not as big a loss. So if the fans are there, and depending on how far Sony went into the production of this series already, we could potentially see at least the second film, depending on how Sony wants to handle the loss. And to be fair, they could go ahead and jump into the future with this and get a different actress to play a more senior
Yes.
Madam Web, and that would kind of make it a little bit easier to tie to future projects, as well as get maybe a bigger name behind it. And that might make a difference as far as, the likability of the character, as
Yeah.
well as the believability to where she fits within that Spider-Man multiverse.
Great point, and I'm gonna let Kage go in, but I just want to tag along with what Button said there. I think that is the right move because I don't think Dakota Johnson will come back. Go ahead, Kage.
Well, I was going to say, if they want to make a sequel, or I hate to say it, but reboot it, this is the first movie, didn't do so great. I feel like they can get away with it, and here's why. Madam Web in the comic, this I do know, she can view different timelines. Not just view different timelines, she can actually go into the past and talk to past people in the past. She can interact with them. And I don't think it's
To alter the timelines.
I don't know if it's that so much, because Neff, the part I'm talking about. She can go back in time and see her pregnant mom. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Yeah. I
almost
see
like,
eyes
it's
getting
almost
big.
like gathering information.
And
Yeah.
she can talk. She can actually engage and embrace. She had a hug with her mom, talking to her for a few minutes, and that was her waking up her powers. She can't
Okay.
she's not just an observer in time. She can actually talk to the people. Now, whether or not she can actually change the future, I don't think so, but that's where my comic knowledge ends right there. But she was able to do that. But from what I saw online, she can go to different dimensions, and if there are different dimensions, there could be different Madam Webs in different universes.
Right.
So in that way, in that respect, you can actually, I think you could get another actress and make a brand new movie, tell the same story, maybe help with the pacing. I think that was a big issue. It took too long for her, in my opinion, to
Right.
get her powers.
Right, and you
watch
see it come in and out, right.
You watch Spider-Man, Peter Parker, Tobey Maguire, he gets bit by the spider.
First 20 minutes.
20,
in, you're
30
like,
minutes.
he's-
Okay,
yeah.
we get the origin, we're moving
Powers
on.
develop in the film.
Yes.
And
And
she's
we-
like in and out. Like certain things come across, and she's like, that doesn't make sense. But that's the physical, I guess, example, right? Manifestation of
so
her
it's not-
powers
it's not an
developing.
Yeah, her-
instantaneous, I got bit by
No,
a spider and now I
no.
have spider
Right,
powers.
Yeah, I feel
This
like-
is like gradual build
Correct.
up to it.
She wasn't a fully manifested Madam Web until the very end of the movie, in the chair with the glasses, with her Powerpuff Girls team or whatever. Everyone's awesome. Everyone's amazing. We had to wait until the entire
Yeah.
movie to see that. And when we had the last 30 minutes, the crescendo, if you will, the girls didn't have powers. You showed me them having powers before.
Another bait and switch.
Yes,
In a
yes,
sense.
thank you.
In a
You
sense.
get to the end, and I'm thinking, okay, now they're gonna fight the bad guy. Now they're gonna help her, and everyone's gonna have their powers. And they're like, no, they're just running around normal. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and they use that in the trailer too to kind of bait people in. You see them with their suits on and stuff like that. So you're like, oh, we're gonna see something cool here.
It's the X-Men, but none of them have
Yes.
powers.
Yes, and my last complaint, and I'm curious on your thoughts on this. I don't buy it. You have Madam Web with 3 teenagers that all look about her age. They're supposed to be teenagers, but I'm like, okay, all of y'all are in your 20s. She's not. If she's 30, she's early 30s, but they look too close in age. So that kind of breaks the immersion for me,
so it's
like
more-
in trying to
more-
buy your story.
Yeah, so it's more big sisters
Right.
as opposed
I'll
to
buy that.
Motherly,
instead
yeah.
of mothers,
Right.
yeah, and daughters.
Yeah, there's a part Buttons where when she first she lets them know that they're in danger. They're kind of like, "What are you talking about? You're crazy, lady." So she kind of low key abducts them, right? And they're so
Just a minor
right. So
kidnapping.
they end up stealing a taxi, driving off, and they end up in the woods somewhere. And she's like, "I need you guys to just stay here for 3 hours. I'll come back." And it's like, I understand that you're like, the villain probably won't find them in the middle of the woods, but they're 15 and they're in the middle of the woods. Why would you
And
leave
some
them?
lady ran
And
off
then
with
she
us,
goes
and it's
to, like,
You guys
Peru.
just need to hang out here.
Right.
guys."
Then she gets on a plane and goes to Peru, and then she comes back to New York. And based off the pacing of how they go through those scenes, you would think it all happened in one day.
And
They didn't show a very good passage of time.
I have a question. I was there. I was watching the movie. I did not get up. No one was talking to me. That being said, what happened in the end? What happened in the end? Because, okay, we're on top of a building. There's a helicopter, and the helicopter is helping them. And it's like, go here, go here, go here. And she's like, okay. And she's got the girls, okay, follow me. We're going to go this way. And then the bad guy is chasing him. And I see stuff being shot and I'm like, okay, it's not coming from the helicopter. So where's all this coming from? Why is the building exploding?
Yeah.
And that's pretty bad. Where
that's
I'm
what
in
I
there,
mean.
I'm watching the movie. I just watched the movie. I should know the answers to these questions.
Right.
But, like, your movie didn't make sense. So now I'm in there, I'm watching it, and I still don't know what I'm watching. Why is the building exploding?
Right,
Here's a-
right.
What's firing the rockets or the missiles? And they're talking, having a conversation, and stuff is like, phew, phew, and they're dodging stuff.
And
I'm
I
like,
think Ezekiel Sims literally punches a rocket, like to deflect
I
it.
saw
and I
that,
said, did he
but-
just punch that rocket? I was
Where
like,
did
come
the-
on.
when you said that just now, I just thought of Lightning McQueen.
Ciao.
Yeah, if you would have added that sound effect in it, I'm like, you know what? We've seen all the zany stuff. You might as well hit me with a ka-chow.
I know we talked about disbelief with Argyle, but you mentioning that made me think of the scene in there where they're in this room and there's an oil spill and they're like, nobody fire any guns.
Yeah.
Don't fire any guns. And so they start knife fighting, right? And then at the very end of the whole thing, she pulls out 2 automatic machine guns.
I know.
And just starts firing all around the room inside while she's got the oil pretty much all around her, and she just starts open firing everywhere. And you're like, why then? Why did we have this whole scene? And you even went through the point of going, hey, nobody fire any guns because it'll blow us up.
Right.
And then she just like open fires and just shoots at everybody. And I'm just like, well, then why? Then why?
And here's another plot hole twist, because I'm a nerd and I just thought about this. Metal scraping on concrete floor makes sparks.
That's
so if
very
you're
true.
skating on the ground, even though there's oil, if you dig your heel in enough, even while skating on the oil, you're gonna make a spark.
Well, and that oil spread around, but that doesn't mean that it coated the entire floor in the same thickness of oil either.
True. So how would you guys, well, I should say Kage, how would you compare this to the Spider-Mans that we've had? To me, I'll go first. To me, like I said, the dialogue was the weakest point of the film, and if you don't have good dialogue, you can't keep people interested in the story. With Spider-Man, things progress a lot faster. The dialogue is a lot better. It's more important, right? And so you just feel more interested in the character. Now, of course, it helps that Spider-Man is a popular character and people like Spider-Man. But with this, like I said, it felt very empty. So when I'm comparing it to Spider-Man films, I would say it's almost very boring in comparison. You know what I mean? And like I said, it had nothing to do with like the action and how it was done. The movie doesn't look that bad to me.
It's just purely the
It's
dialogue.
just, to me, the dialogue, it's weird. It's like, man, the dialogue is just, it's baseless. What is it leading to? There's no depth to anything, right? I feel like if the dialogue might have been a little more centered on serious activity, stuff like that, or maybe, like we said, and Kage said, I'm seeing these women, they're in these spider suits, and they're beating the villain up, because the thing, Ezekiel Sims was basically very paranoid because he could see visions, because I believe he was bitten by the same spider that Madam Web's mom was. So he had basically Madam Web's powers in a sense, right? So he kept seeing a vision where the girls were killing him when they were older. So he's like, I have to kill them before they kill me.
So it was more driving him insane.
Yes.
But they did say the spider people that they talked about, they said they tried to save her and her mom, or her mom when she was pregnant with her.
Right.
But they said this guy stole the power, and because he stole the power, he was actually cursed. So he can climb on walls and stuff, and he has little visions and stuff, but he does not have the powers she does.
Yeah,
and what's
not to
funny
that
enough
extent.
is she cannot do those things. She can't climb on the walls and ceilings and stuff, but man, is she terrifyingly powerful with her mind. She
Right.
can go back in time. She can make mental projections of
Right.
herself that can rescue 3 people at the same time. But then at the end, she's blind and confined to a wheelchair. But think about it. She can still do all that.
Even more powerful in a sense.
Right. So he can, okay, cool. He can do all the physical stuff, but bound to a wheelchair, she's terrifyingly powerful.
Right. And then the girls, like we said, they haven't developed their powers in this film, but
Yeah.
you see that they actually become very intricate in helping her. Right? And this is, like I said before, she goes blind and things like that. But like I said, they lead it up for it to be said, hey, there's probably going to be another film where you're going to see a continuation of this, and then maybe it really blossoms. But once again, like I said with Sony, this is very important. This first film, female-led Spider-Man universe-esque movie. You know what I mean? You got to knock it out the park with this, because this is really the appetizer. If they don't like the appetizer, I mean,
Nobody's
you
going to
could.
stick around for the main course.
They're not going to
Right.
stick around. You could, but, you know, don't be mad if you get the same type of quality in your entree. You know what I mean? You can't say, "Oh man, this one
I didn't
it
know
really
it was,
sucked."
I didn't know it was coming.
Correct.
I feel
you know.
like I feel
So
like
that's how I feel about it. I'll pass it on to Kage though.
yeah, they could have, you know what I mean? Like, if this movie was better, like this kind of slow lead up, I really wish the pacing was better. It doesn't take over an hour and a half for her to get her powers. We should have gotten that origin story in about 30 minutes, and the chunk of the movie is her learning her powers, and at the end, we have a big fight. I think that's how it should have been, and then the second movie would be more action. We don't need to set up the origin. Now we're just straight action movie, and then if we would have had a trilogy, we could have had, wait for it, Spider-Man join the thing. I'm not a director,
That's
but
a good point.
I feel like that's how this could have went.
And I would add that I wish that, like that end scene that we saw, Kage, where you see all the girls, they don't show their powers, but you see them in their suits, and you see Dakota Johnson's Madam Web in her suit. It's like a more of a kind of, it's not wheelchair stuff, right? She's
Yeah.
actually showing her powers, correct? What if we got that in the last 30 minutes fighting Ezekiel Sims, and then it goes into, you'll see what happens next. Instead of you fight Ezekiel Sims, only Madam Web has her powers, not to the extent that she's going to have them later on in the film. The girls don't really have their powers, but you see they're working together as a team now. Why not take that out and just have what I just explained? Because then that will get people really excited. Instead of saying, oh, it's at the end, like, okay, like, why couldn't I see this before? Once again, like Kage said, it just gets you to that crescendo a lot faster. You can cut out the fat, right? And you get to the meat and potatoes, because people do want to see meat and potatoes.
Yeah.
You build out a world, we understand, but with these superhero films, you
Yeah.
need meat and potatoes to keep people interested.
Well, and I think, Neff, I think you bring up a good point, because, we've seen it in movies in the past where they basically go to the end and then jump back in time. And if Madam Web's power is all about time travel, and, well, I mean, not only about that, but predicting the future and being able to do those things, then I think it would have been interesting to kind of see her in her final, like, fully blossomed, you know, form at the very beginning of the movie, and see, okay, now we jump back to before you had anything and how you've reached this final moment, of her coming into her full powers and defeating the big enemy or whatever. If it wasn't going to be the girls doing it, you know what I mean? Like, if they weren't going to be the main focus as far as developing their powers and things like that, it was all about Madam Web developing powers, then I think it would have been interesting to kind of see that at the beginning, to pull in the audience a little bit more and go, okay, how did she get from, you know, being a paramedic to this kind of, because all of a sudden it jumps back to before she had any powers, and you kind of see like, oh, okay, where's this going? Like, how did this happen to her? Because from what you guys are saying is it was a slow build. Her powers were kind of all over the place, as far as developing and things like that, in and out, kind of fading in and out of where she's not really knowing what's going on. But, you know, I do think that they have a character that I think people would want to see more of. I think they just probably didn't execute it in a way that the, you know, fans or the people who, you know, again, Madam Web, I'd never heard of Madam Web until they started developing this movie. So, you know, you're purely kind of going off of what people know of Spider-Man, and anybody who had actually read the comic books and knew who Madam Web was.
Right.
So it kind of sounds like this is not your traditional Madam Web. So those fans were probably disappointed. And then for anybody who is going into it thinking, oh, Madam Web, it's like Spider-Man. So they're going to sit down and watch this movie and go, this is not Spider-Man. We thought maybe this was like a female version of Spider-Man, but it's not. It's this character who ends up going blind and can predict the future, or, you know, has visions.
Yeah. Right, and
so
I think
this is not Spider-Man.
Right, I think it's one of those things like what you said, where they're trying to cater to a lot of audiences, but they didn't successfully cater to either audience
They don't
because they
know
don't
their
know
audience.
what they're doing.
Right.
Right, they're like, oh, okay, well, yeah, you know what I mean? And then the
We'll
audience.
flesh it out in-
right.
in
this
part
is what
2
I
and
talked
3.
about before with certain characters. You really got to work on them hard to have them cut through to the mainstream audience, because if someone doesn't know anything about Madam Web, like I said, I know some things about Madam Web. Kage knows some things about Madam Web. I understand her background and her character and the powers that her character holds, and things about the Spider-Verse as well, right? I have knowledge on that. Your mainstream audience, if they don't know that, they're going to be watching in confusion, especially if you have weak dialogue. Now they're just not even interested in it.
Right.
It's not going to work. But I got some names here just for the other Spider women. We had Julia Cornwell, Anya Cortizone, and Maddie Franklin. So those are the three that, you know, Madam Web has basically brought in.
Her
Right,
mentees.
she's brought in. They are her mentees. So,
Yeah.
like I said, the movie is not the worst movie. I give it a 5.5 out of 10. I think Kage gave it a 5. I really do want Buttons to watch this so she can just see what we're saying, because it's interesting when you actually get to see it in its entirety, and then she'll really be able to say, hey, I get what they're saying with that, and this is how I felt about it personally. But yeah, you know, if anybody saw Madam Web and they listened to this podcast, please write something in the comments. We want to
Yeah,
see
we
what
wanna
you
hear your
guys
thoughts.
say about it. I'm going to talk to some people outside of the podcast as well and get their opinions on it. I think we're going to close it there. That was a good episode, folks. Like, subscribe, comment. I am Neff, joined with
Kage.
Ann.
Buttons.
Join us for the next episode of the Popcorn Square Podcast. Be safe.
Late.